Hi, this is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in to Simply Enough.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period. Welcome to Simply Enough, where we celebrate you.
Because you are enough. Just as you are.
Period. Just spilled my water. It is Pride Month.
You know, as a queer person myself, I would just hope that pride can live on throughout the year.
Let's hope for and aim for and pray for a place of where it just is.
I want to give a shout out to the pioneers for any movement that we're pushing just closer towards the future where we're just celebrating each other.
We all are a part of an us as opposed to others.
And our youth who are similar pioneers, but just in a different way.
They're just being, they're living. That's what makes it normalized, is they're living. It's who they are. We're all humanity. We all have so much similarities in our experience. If we just look with curiosity and not judgment, there's actually so much that connects us. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, Simply Enough. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio.
And I'm Mr. Zachary Leonard.
And Zachary's like honing in on me on YouTube, if you can watch, because he's just seeing how am I going to handle this? Because everybody, I introduced the episode. I think it's like the first time I really, truly kicked off the episode. So sorry for the rough start. But I actually wanted to start the episode because I noticed that today is June 30th, which means it is the last day of Pride Month. And I wanted to talk about it because I have so many feelings, obviously, in support of Pride Month, but I also, just have questions. And so Zachary and I are trying to do something a little bit different where we actually don't really have a theme per se, more topic of conversation, almost as if, we're at a coffee shop, sitting over coffee and just chatting, right?
I love it.
So this being June 30th, the last day of Pride Month, I had a couple thoughts about it. One was, this will be brief, but one was, of course, we need a Pride Month because the road to inclusivity and then ultimately equity first starts with awareness, of diversity, right? So there's this big movement of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Awareness is the first step, and awareness and celebration, even. That's the best type of awareness, is celebration. So I'm all about Pride Month, much like Breast Cancer Month in October is very important, and prostate cancer with, Movember with the mustaches in November is so important. But there's just a part of me that can't help but wonder, is it serving the ultimate purpose? Because have things morphed into this kind of almost kitschy merchandise kind of thing where it's almost not trivialized, but it's just reduced to like, okay, we'll focus on Pride for the month of June. Whereas tomorrow, come July 1st, I will still be the most staunch supporter, to the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
So I wanted to throw that out there, if that's okay. And then the reason why I'm like trying to talk so much is because I just feel like I'm going to be like, and take it away, Zachary.
No.
The second thing that I wanted to talk about, or I have been thinking about because of Pride Month, is something I actually shared with Zachary. There was, for the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, they have their own, Facebook page and Instagram page or whatever. And to their credit, woot woot, they highlighted a orthopedic surgeon and her wife, very accomplished, very successful orthopedic surgeon. And one of the commenters came from a presumptively cisgendered straight orthopedic male who said, well, if there's a Pride Month, when is there going to be a straight month?
Mm-hmm.
And I was so irritated by that because I'm like, freaking straight month is every single day. It's every single day of the year. That's straight day, straight month. Like that's the whole point of majority versus minority, or I don't want to say versus as if it's antagonistic, but why do you have to go there? Like why can't a month be used to celebrate the LGBTQ plus community without having to then say, well, what about, us straight people? And I handled it immaturely because, of course, my post was—
That's a label.
My comment actually to that, was to that point of, straight month is pretty much every day of the year. And sorry if you felt marginalized, when there is a micro penis month, we'll be sure to recognize you. Yeah. But it's just amazing how quick one can be in celebrating one group, taking offense, for their own group. And I remember even, with Black Lives Matter, or, well, especially I'll bring in Black Lives Matter. I remember I had a patient who was amazing that he felt so comfortable telling this to me, a woman, immigrant, Filipina, Asian American, going off on how, these minorities and, not only do Black Lives Matter, but Blue Lives Matter, which they do. I'm not debating that, but it was just going off to me. And I'm just kind of like, do you not recognize your audience? But okay. And so I had to frame it to him like, okay, there are 276, I actually don't know exactly, 276 bones in your body. And you're here for me to take care of you and pay attention because you have a fibula fracture, which is one bone of the body. Do the other 275 bones matter? Absolutely. But right now, what we're needing to focus on is your fibula fracture because it's broken. I'm not being dismissive of your 275 other bones, but we need to focus on your fibula. It's not unlike what's happening now. Why must you take offense in focusing on Black Lives Matter or the queer community? That doesn't necessarily have to equate to detracting from anybody else. It's just putting a focus right now on another community. Okay, I'm done. That's all I have to say. I'm just going to throw that out there. Take it away, Zachary.
It's a good segue because I think that's what the purpose of the months started out to be, which was we recognize there isn't enough focus on these communities or these issues, breast cancer, prostate cancer, or even February being, Black History Month, June being Pride Month. I think in its intention, it's exactly what you're saying, which is the representation of these marginalized communities or these issues deserve some kind of focus. So perhaps we need to scaffold it, or we need to structure it in a specific way to then elevate the group of people or an issue, et cetera. And so let's do it by giving them a month. I'm in the same camp with you. Of mixed feelings about it. And I also come at it from an educator lens, and I'll share that lens in just a minute. But, as a queer person myself, I'm a little nauseous at all of the rainbow shit that I see in all the stores these days, especially when I know many of these stores are big financial benefactors of politicians who push a conservative agenda that works against legislation for the queer community. And that's where I recognize in some ways, okay, there's a capitalistic element to this that really has nothing to do with the people for whom they say that they are, they're supporting or they're advocating on behalf of. And that's where I get really angry, like tight jaw, small mouth, small eyes, red-faced angry, because something that was I would say in its inception, incredibly, I would like to believe pure, has now become something that's so far away from that. And almost, to the benefit of the pockets of the people who will boldly take your money and then shit all over you the minute like they've gotten your money. So there's a capital part of this that I don't like. That isn't to say that I don't like some of the merch that has some of the rainbow gear on it. Mm-hmm. And also will continue to support the companies that I feel in general live with pride awareness or minority awareness or gender awareness, ableism or, disableism awareness all the time, and then I applaud them for their efforts in June to like put out there what they do. So does it piss me off that Uber, when I'm in an Uber and the car that's picking me up has a rainbow flag on it? Yeah, I feel it's a little lame. But then when I read some of the things that Uber does, now I'm going to want to know more. Does Uber sponsor politicians that advocate on behalf of queer people? So now I'm getting into the political side of it, which I do appreciate. From a consumer side of it, I'm going to make a quick tangent to one of my classrooms and then also just education in general. One of the first times I ever taught kindergarten was at a school in Lower Manhattan, admittedly, and I'm just putting this out there. I had a bin in my library because I kept my books in bins with labels for kindergartners to find. And it was the multicultural bin. Okay. It was the bin version of a month. So like if you wanted to read a story with an Asian American leading character, or if you wanted to read a story about, a same-sex couple like and Tango Makes Three, all of the diversity books went into that bin. And upon reflection, or upon looking back now, I'm like, that is so contrary to my own beliefs, right? But I thought by slapping the multicultural label on this, I was like, look at what I'm doing. Good intention, maybe needs a little bit more follow through. However, as a step in the process towards weaving that into just the general library and also our general thinking, I understand why that step would exist. And as a queer person, I appreciate Pride Month as one of those steps. Would I like the programming on cable or Netflix to just always have representation of queer stories without needing a label that says Pride movies or voices from the queer community? Yes. I don't want to be segregated in that regard. Mm-hmm. And Elizabeth, I think that you have, I imagine similar stories, or at least a wonderful perspective to share as a woman, as a Filipina, as an immigrant in a different way that challenges what I'm saying or similar. Because I think the experiences aren't that far away from each other in the way that they manifest themselves in building awareness in our nation toward these underrepresented communities that have rich culture, rich history, and also experience marginalization and systemic oppression, et cetera. So calling it out, I find to be incredibly valuable. So I'm kind of in the place of feeling mixed about it. Do I wear more rainbow affiliated stuff in June? No, that's not necessarily, because I wear my Love is Love shirts all the time. And I don't see June as being any more of a special month than others. Do I think the parades and the moments to celebrate and the community to come together and say, this is who we are, and this is our history, and we actually talk about Stonewall, and we talk about these moments, these seminal moments in queer history? I think that's important. I think it's important for our queer youth and our non-queer youth to hear these stories and to understand how they are a part of a movement that has truly changed our nation. And I would also say, with a lot of the legislation that is pushing forth, particularly for our trans youth, and I get really sad and angry about this, I don't know that the needle has moved all that much for our queer youth. And I struggle in thinking about what it would be like to be a trans student or kid or youth in today's day and age, and to hear all this legislation that says you can't be a swimmer, or any parent that supports you in your gender exploration could be arrested for child abuse. And this is the narrative that these kids are growing up in, and that's not dissimilar from a narrative that I grew up with. And so my heart breaks when I recognize that in some ways things have progressed so dramatically and beautifully, and then in other ways they haven't. That was kind of a roller coaster response to everything that you brought up. Only to say that, yes, we're at the end of June and we go into July, and I would just hope that pride or an awareness of our Black brothers and sisters, or our disabled brothers and sisters, or our Filipino brothers and sisters, whatever brothers and sisters, can live on throughout the year and not just kind of show up in whatever month and then just like disappear, as if we can say, check, we acknowledge them, and now we're going to go back to, you know, our quote unquote normal lives. So anyway.
Well, and I think the way to do that is to get to a place of seeing, and it's a journey, but get to a place of seeing the universality as opposed to the distinctions.
Mhm.
But we have to start, for those that have been in the shadows and marginalized, we have to start with the awareness. But ultimately, if we as a society can come to a place of universality, I think that's the goal. The way to get there is, you know, of course, I think of Ted Lasso. Where am I going with this? So with Ted Lasso, one of my favorite episodes, it was in the first season, and Ted Lasso is in a dart contest, and he quotes Walt Whitman, which has now been debunked actually by Walt Whitman scholars, that Walt Whitman did not say it, but it's still profound, which what he quoted is, be curious, not judgmental. And I think if we're able to approach everybody with more curiosity and wanting to know more and learn more, as opposed to judgment, that's how we'll get there. And perhaps that's why we have to start off, though, with these awareness months, to pique curiosity. And I loved actually what you said. I didn't think about it this way, but you know, the parades and the events, so that it's not just about wearing merch, which is just so kind of passive, but to witness the joy and love and humanity is what is endearing, and I think might draw in those who are initially because of their learned judgmental mindset, might endear them to be like, these are people too. We're all people. We're all humanity. And, you know, if that's via, you know, events and parties and parades, being curious as opposed to judgmental is probably the glue that will bind all of us. So I will say, out of curiosity, I don't want to miss this opportunity, actually, because as much as you said, you know, let's talk about this, and this is important for, you know, our queer youth and anybody in the queer community, I'm actually going to say, from a straight cisgendered place, which is me, please tell me about Stonewall. I am humbled and am mortified that I don't know what you're talking about, which is clearly so seminal to the queer community. So please inform me, and please use this as an opportunity to teach us in the audience more about what are you talking about in terms of Stonewall.
It's a bar in New York City, and really marked the moment, the first major moment in the gay movement, queer movement, when there was a pushback of like, we aren't going to take the oppression or the malcontent, the lack of respect and treatment that we've been getting. So there was a bar in New York City, Stonewall, that was known to be a place where queer individuals hung out. And it was also, I mean, very progressive for its time, because there were drag queens there too. You know, now with current culture and RuPaul and whatnot, I think drag is very much in mainstream, right? But at its very core, drag is very incredibly progressive. And also drag for, you know, the 1970s and 80s was a form of expression that was very not okay. So there was a bar in New York City where, drag queens and members of the queer community would hang out. And the police knew this, and they would raid these bars, but then also they would use that to lord power over them, to like get money, or, you know, to just like take advantage of the queer community in whatever way served them best. So that occasionally they would just show up and they would just raid the place without a permit, without any other reason than they just could, or they would demand money in order not to, right? So there was constantly this community that felt like at any point in time, they just have to take it, whatever it was, financial or physical in many ways, or they get arrested. And this is the first time they're like, no, you're not coming in. You are not coming into our bar. And it was a riot. I mean, it was a literal throwdown of a group of people saying, fuck you, you are not doing this anymore. You have no legal standing. You cannot do this. We're not going to take this anymore. And it was essentially the queer community's first stance of saying, we are a group that deserves respect. Mm-hmm. How freaking cool is that?
I'm just embarrassed not to know that. Like, I mean, I have no idea. I had no idea, but this is again where there is universality and humanity mm-hmm. in that stance that was taken. So whereas one might be so quick to think of the queer community as others, mm-hmm. right? How wonderful if we can all come from a place of, well, actually what makes us similar. I recognize that feeling of standing up for oneself. Mm-hmm. I empathize with that feeling of, not having authority and, there's just so much that can be understood. Then there's the conversation on the flip side of white fragility and how there are those that are taking such offense because there is such an attempt now for awareness of the quote other communities. And I don't want to giggle, but I empathize with, believe it or not, how hurt and even frightened they may be feeling with their white fragility, mm-hmm. because ironically, don't they see how that actually connects them to these marginalized communities, because they're getting a taste of and they're feeling now what it feels like to be put in the other category. And honestly, feeling shame, and that is exactly what the quote other with a capital O, the other communities have been feeling for so long. It's just now the majority mm-hmm. Are now experiencing that.
Yeah.
And so I don't, when I say white fragility, and I know that that's weaponized now, I actually see that from a place of empathy. Like, yes, my friends in the majority, I feel for you, because it does, it hurts, and it feels unfair, to feel shame and to feel marginalized, but it is the very thing that the minority groups have been feeling for so long.
Yeah.
So if in any way we can actually tap into that shared feeling, I don't know, maybe that's another way that we can all come together and again find the humanity mm-hmm. of where can we find equality and equity mm-hmm. as opposed to otherness.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. Yeah.
And it's just, though it seems almost so quaint now, it is so true. Love is love is love is love is love. And if we can find that universality, then I told this to a patient actually who was just going off about same-sex marriage and was struggling with the fact that his daughter was a lesbian and was about to, get married to her fiance, now wife, but it was struggling. And he kept saying like, okay, well, but I'm trying, and I accept her, I accept it. And isn't this so funny? This is my orthopedic surgery patient. Yet this is sometimes the conversation. This is how my
Yep.
coaching business started. Is that it veers beyond
Yep.
orthopedic surgery. But I was talking to him and I was like, is there any way that you can get beyond a place of acceptance? Because she is going to live her life, whether you accept her or not. But wouldn't you love instead for you to not accept her, but to love her, just purely love her, that it's not a matter of acceptance. It's not a matter of you giving the thumbs up or the thumbs down, but just that you love her.
Yeah.
Why does the plumbing, meaning, her sexuality and who she chooses to love, why does who she marries, male or female, that's plumbing. Why does that
Right.
matter? Doesn't programming matter more? Would you feel better if she was going to marry an abusive, narcissistic male, as opposed to, okay,
Yeah.
she's marrying a woman. So that's the plumbing. But wow, this woman comes from a place of love. She comes from a wonderful family. So she knows what a partnership looks like, and she
Right.
knows what a marriage looks like. That's programming. Why does the plumbing matter?
It does to some people.
And
I don't.
It's so funny too, because it's not like, heterosexuals, have the monopoly and have cornered the market on great marriages and monogamous, long-lasting relationships. You know what I mean? Like statistically, 50% and divorce. So again, that's just where I'm just kind of like, why does the plumbing matter?
Yeah.
Whether it's the programming, it's the mindset, it's the intention, and it's not just the intention, it's the active daily choice of loving.
Mhm.
I think back, one of my most loving, perfect, there's nothing perfect, but close to perfect, married couple patients that I have, are, they're a gay couple that have been together. They're now in their 70s. I can only imagine what they had gone through to be who they were and be who they were together with each other in the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah.
Yet, wow, they are the exemplary couple
Mhm.
of love and of marriage.
Mhm.
So again, that's who cares about the plumbing? It's the programming. There's so much more that connects us, but it depends on our desire to wear the lens and perspective of what makes us similar rather than different.
Mhm.
But sometimes to get to that place of, oh, we actually share far more, we have to lift those that have been in the shadows and put awareness on them first to bring them to the table so that we can all be at the table together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Which it does, which is, I just to call out an important distinction that you made. Acceptance in many ways, in my mind, is a passive way of interacting with somebody, where love is truly interactive. Like you engage, you're participating in that, right? And you kick this off by really coming from a place of curiosity, and curiosity begs that you ask questions. It's, tell me why, tell me your story, I want to know more, right? And if we look at Pride Month as really being just one example of an opportunity for us to ask questions or move from tolerance, which I have such a problem with that word, because it's passive, and it's also like you don't really have to do anything with it, where curiosity,
but sometimes that has to be the biggest step, right?
the big, exactly
to even get to the place of tolerance and
right.
acceptance.
And that's why I'm saying, I think what we're also identifying is like these months or these times serve a purpose in the progression to no longer needing them. It's almost like we're trying to like put these months out of a job, right? Because
yes,
right. And then also if just bring back Stonewall for a second, to truly come from a place of curiosity, but also compassion, because that's a through line of things that you're saying. We're looking at 1969, right? Is when Stonewall happened. And then the following year, 1970, launched kind of the beginning of these gay pride parades. This was truly an act of violence, right? what kind of pressure did the queer community have to live under that they finally bubbled up to needing to a point where they had to just like use physical force to stop whatever oppression or violence or whatever they were getting, primarily from the police, but just also the FBI, mainstream media, et cetera. When I kind of compare that with the Black Lives marches that experienced last year, my first thought is, holy shit, that is now the resort that they've gotten to. So what have they tried? What have they experienced? And look, I'm even asking questions to get to a point to understand what it's been like for them, that now their tactic is to literally demonstrate anger. Holy cow. I want to know more about that, because clearly they were living under just neglect and disrespect and not even acceptance or tolerance, but marginalization. Fuck yeah.
Gag orders, muffled.
Yes.
I mean, they no voice. And if I may throw in there, with the rise during the pandemic of hate crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, I'll speak from the Asian American standpoint, especially females, we are almost groomed. And we groom our in the Asian American or in the Asian culture, we groom each other this way. So I'm not blaming the white man on this. Okay. I'm just saying we groom each other. And then, yes, then it's magnified, as an immigrant coming to America, of how Asians, we are to be demure and we are to be accepting and we are to be the behaved group. And it does sometimes come to having to get to a boiling point to find one's voice. But it's just, there's so many groups, and it's important to recognize the otherness of the groups, especially when those other with, or we other with a capital O, we other groups now finally have a voice and have a platform where not perhaps we have been in the shadows, but now with the awareness, being invited to the table and sharing the table and getting to know each other. And then in getting to know each other from a place of curiosity rather than judgment, we can break bread together.
I have the biggest smile on my face for those of you that aren't watching us on YouTube, which, I encourage you, because we're fun people to watch. I've said it before. I'll say it again. We're fun to watch. We went into this episode a little like, let's just see what happens. And in my core, and I talked about this last week, this little like instinct, this little like, little jab in the middle of my body that was like, we're going to glean some big takeaway. And I think if that is the takeaway, anytime a month comes up, if it's a moment to recognize, okay, it's Black History Month, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, blah, blah, blah. If the takeaway is use that as a reminder to just come from a place of curiosity to understand someone's story, you might actually find the universality that we all live under. So even if it's Pride Month, it doesn't have to be find all my queer friends, tell me your story. It's like, Elizabeth, you're my friend. I don't really know a whole lot about your childhood. Right. So it's not just about Pride or whatever month it is. Take it as an opportunity to just live in a place of curiosity, to understand, appreciate, learn from the people that are sitting across from you or next to you.
Yeah, because never mind the month, because again, we already established the months are important, but how about a way of life? How about a way to approach being mindful and being present of oneself and of the person in front of you?
You know who's teaching us to do this? As just a final thought, are our youth. And I will say I've had a number of conversations with they're now high school or college freshmen about just their own identity, et cetera. And what's fascinating is it's like, you never really have those moments that you're an old fuddy-duddy until like you can't get out of bed because your knees hurt, or you like make an expression and they're like, no one says that anymore, Or when with this one particular individual, I said, what has your coming out process been like? And this person was like, what are you talking about? I don't need to come out. This is just who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what a big generational shift, right? Where look at where we are, where it's my need to have a month, so to speak, or my need to come out is not necessarily where our current generation. Now, I'm not saying this is one person among a generation, but that was the sentiment that I got that other friends of this person shared, which was it just is, rather than it needs to be elevated and called out and called attention to and celebrated just for that moment. So I think our youth are teaching us this as well.
And of course, so I already brought up Ted Lasso. So to your point, of course, now I have to bring up Schitt's Creek.
Yeah.
Love Schitt's Creek. Everybody binge watch that if you haven't. And if you have already, binge watch it again.
Yep.
So to your point of like, it just is. When can we get to a place, let's hope for and aim for and pray for a place of where it just is. That's exactly what Schitt's Creek did, right? And Schitt's Creek, relative to the queer community, was not about making a loud statement and some proclamation. It was actually, you are just witnessing the love, not only between David and Patrick, David,
David.
between David and Patrick, but also just the love of the family and the community in the town, not making it a big deal.
Yep.
Because we're all humanity. We all have so much similarities in our experience. If we just look for it, if we just look with curiosity, not judgment, and we try to look for it as opposed to be surprised by it, right? There's actually so much that connects us as opposed to separates us.
Yeah. And I, one final thought on my part that builds off what you're saying is, I want to give a shout out to the pioneers as an active voice or an activist towards any movement that needed a loud voice, and whatever label comes with that, aggressive or violent, whatever label, right? But those loud voices that were pushing. So the people at Stonewall, whoever in whatever community, there are those people that stood up, took a stand, and pushed us closer towards the future that we want to see, where we're just celebrating each other, right? But then
the
also,
future is that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I just also want to say the connection between our youth, who are similar pioneers, but just in a different way. So maybe they're not like fighting for gay rights, right? But they're fighting for a world in which coming out or needing to come out is a non-issue. And that's equally important in the movement towards a world that we've been talking about. So
that's because they're not necessarily fighting. They're just being, they're living. So it's not fighting. So that's what makes it normalized, is their living. It's who they are. Why? Because there's so much more. We all are, I should say. We all are a part of an us as opposed to others.
You are simply enough. Just as you are.
Period.
We love you.
Love you.
Thank you for joining us.